It was one of those Tuesday afternoons where the sky just opens up and dumps rain on everything. The kind of rain that makes you run for cover and ruins your shoes. I was sitting in this little coffee shop downtown, hunched over my laptop trying to finish a project that was already 2 days past deadline. My boss had been sending me emails with increasingly aggressive exclamation points, and I was starting to feel the pressure. The cafe was packed. Everyone in the city seemed to have the same idea about waiting out the storm. The sound of rain hammering against the windows mixed with the hiss of the espresso machine and the low buzz of conversations. I had my headphones in, but I wasn't really listening to anything, just trying to block out the world and focus on the screen in front of me. I didn't notice her at first. There was movement in my peripheral vision, someone standing next to my table. I ignored it, thinking they'd move on, but they didn't. After a few seconds, I felt obligated to look up. And that's when everything changed. She was standing there with a coffee cup in one hand and her phone in the other, water dripping from her jacket onto the floor. Her hair was damp from the rain pushed back from her face, and she was looking right at me. "Is anyone sitting here?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. I should have said something smooth or clever. Instead, I just stared at her for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 2 seconds. There was something about her eyes that caught me completely off guard. They were warm and honest, the kind of eyes that make you forget what you were thinking about. "No. Go ahead," I finally managed to say. Pulling my bag off the chair, she smiled, a small, grateful smile, and sat down. "Thanks. This place is crazy today." I nodded and went back to my laptop, or at least I tried to, but I couldn't concentrate anymore. I was suddenly very aware of her presence across from me. The way she carefully arranged her things on the table, how she wrapped both hands around her coffee cup, like she was trying to warm herself up. The book she pulled out from her bag, its cover worn and creased from being read multiple times. I pretended to type, but I wasn't writing anything useful. My fingers were just hitting random keys while my brain was completely elsewhere. I snuck a glance at her over the top of my screen. She was reading, completely absorbed in whatever story she was lost in. Every now and then her expression would change slightly, reacting to something on the page. A small smile, a thoughtful frown. It was fascinating to watch. Then she looked up and our eyes met again. I should have looked away immediately. That would have been the normal thing to do. But I didn't, and neither did she. We just sat there, looking at each other across this small cafe table, with the rain pouring outside and the world continuing around us. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like the cafe had gone completely silent. She looked back down at her book, and I could see a slight color rising in her cheeks. I forced myself to focus on my laptop screen, but the words were just a blur now. My heart was beating faster than it should have been for someone just sitting in a coffee shop. What was happening? I didn't know this person. I hadn't even learned her name. But something about that moment felt significant in a way I couldn't explain. It was like recognizing something you didn't know you'd been looking for. I tried to get back to work, I really did. But every few minutes I'd find myself stealing another glance. And sometimes I'd catch her doing the same thing. Our eyes would meet for a brief second before we both looked away, pretending it hadn't happened. The rain continued to pour outside, showing no signs of stopping. People came and went from the cafe, shaking off umbrellas and ordering hot drinks. The barista called out names for orders. Someone's phone rang loudly, breaking through the ambient noise. But at our small table in the corner, there was this bubble of awareness, this unspoken thing hanging in the air between two strangers. I noticed little things about her, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, how she would sometimes mouth the words she was reading, completely unconscious of doing it, the small silver bracelet on her wrist that she'd occasionally twist with her fingers, these tiny details that I had no reason to notice or remember, but somehow they were imprinting themselves in my mind. An hour passed. Maybe more. I had long since given up on any real work. My project deadline was still looming, but I couldn't bring myself to care as much as I had before. Something else felt more important in this moment, though I couldn't have told you what exactly. She finished her coffee and closed her book. I felt a small panic rise in my chest. She was going to leave. This strange, quiet moment was going to end, and I'd probably never see her again. The city was huge. The chances of randomly running into the same person twice were basically zero. She started gathering her things, putting her book back in her bag. I told myself to say something. Anything. Ask her about the book. Comment on the weather. Make some kind of connection beyond these stolen glances. But the words wouldn't come. My mouth felt dry and my mind was completely blank. She stood up, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "Thanks for sharing the table," she said, giving me that small smile again. "No problem," I said, and immediately hated how casual and indifferent I sounded. She walked toward the door, weaving through the crowded cafe. I watched her go, feeling like I'd just let something important slip through my fingers. She pushed open the door and the sound of rain grew louder for a moment. Then she was gone, disappeared into the gray afternoon. I sat there for a long time after that, staring at the empty chair across from me. The cafe was still packed, still noisy, still full of life, but that corner table felt empty in a way it hadn't before. I finally packed up my things and headed out into the rain. As I walked home, water soaking through my jacket, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Those eyes, that moment of connection with a complete stranger. I'd lived in this city for 5 years, passed thousands of people on the street, sat next to hundreds of strangers in cafes and on buses. But I'd never experienced anything quite like that. That night I couldn't focus on anything. I tried to finish my project, but my mind kept wandering back to the cafe. Back to that table. Back to her. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was nothing. Just a shared moment with a stranger on a rainy day. It happened all the time. It didn't mean anything, but deep down I knew that wasn't true. Something had shifted. Some small part of my carefully ordered life had been disrupted. And the strangest part? I found myself hoping it would happen again. 3 days went by and I couldn't get her out of my head. I know how that sounds. Like some obsessed person fixating on a stranger from a coffee shop. But it wasn't like that. It was more like a song that gets stuck in your mind. You don't try to think about it, but it's just there, playing on repeat in the background of everything else you're doing. Thursday morning, I was on a work call, nodding along to something my colleague was saying about quarterly projections, when I realized I had no idea what we were talking about. My mind had drifted back to that cafe, to those eyes looking at me across the table. Friday evening, I was having dinner with an old friend, and he asked me if I was okay. "You seem distracted," he said. I laughed it off, made some excuse about work stress. But the truth was, I was wondering if she ever thought about that afternoon too, or if it had been completely forgettable for her. By Saturday, I'd convinced myself that I'd built the whole thing up in my head. That's what people do, right? We create stories and meaning out of random moments because we want life to be more interesting than it actually is. She was probably just a woman who needed a seat in a crowded cafe, nothing more. But Sunday came and I found myself walking toward that same coffee shop. I told myself I was going because it was convenient, because they made good coffee, because I needed to get out of my apartment. All reasonable excuses, but I knew the real reason. The weather was different that day. Sunny, crisp, the kind of fall afternoon that makes you feel good to be alive. The cafe was less crowded than it had been on that rainy Tuesday. I ordered my usual drink and looked around for a place to sit. And there she was, same corner table, same worn book in her hands, same way of holding her coffee cup with both hands. For a second I thought I was imagining it, that I'd wanted to see her so badly that my brain had just conjured her up. But no, she was real. She was there. My heart started pounding. What were the odds? This city had hundreds of coffee shops, thousands of places she could have been at this exact moment. And yet here she was in the same spot at almost the same time of day. She hadn't noticed me yet. She was absorbed in her reading just like before. I stood there like an idiot holding my coffee, trying to decide what to do. Should I say something? Should I sit somewhere else and pretend I hadn't seen her? Should I leave before this got weird? Then she looked up and her eyes found mine instantly. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by something else. Surprise, pleasure? I couldn't quite read it. She smiled. Not the polite small smile from before. A real smile that reached her eyes. My feet started moving before my brain could stop them. I walked over to her table, my hand gripping my coffee cup a little too tight. "Hey," I said. Brilliant opening line. "Hey," she replied, still smiling. "Fancy seeing you here." "Yeah, I live in the neighborhood," I said, which was true even if it wasn't the whole truth. "Me too," she said. "Well, I just moved here, actually." About a month ago, there was a pause. One of those moments where you either commit to the conversation or awkwardly excuse yourself. I took a breath. "Mind if I join you?" I was hoping you would, she said, and gestured to the chair across from her. I sat down and suddenly all those things I'd thought about saying to her over the past few days disappeared from my mind. We sat there for a moment in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt familiar somehow, like picking up a conversation we'd already been having. So, she said, closing her book and setting it aside. Do you come here often? She laughed as soon as she said it. Sorry, that sounded like the world's worst pickup line. I laughed too, and just like that, the nervous tension broke. Only when it's raining, I said. Or sunny. Or basically any day ending in Y. A regular then. Pretty much. What about you? She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup again. That same gesture I'd noticed before. I've been coming here most days since I moved. It's nice. Feels less lonely than sitting in my apartment unpacking boxes. New to the city? Newish. I grew up about 3 hours from here, but I've been living on the West Coast for the past 6 years. Just moved back. That's a big change. What brought you back? She looked down at her coffee and I saw something shift in her expression. Sometimes you need to start over, you know? New place, new chapter, all that, I nodded. I did know. We all have our reasons for the choices we make. And sometimes those reasons are complicated and messy and not something you share with a stranger in a coffee shop, no matter how comfortable the conversation feels. I get that, I said simply. She looked up at me and there was gratitude in her eyes. Gratitude for not pushing, for understanding the things left unsaid. Your turn, she said. Why this city? Why this cafe? I leaned back in my chair thinking about how to answer. I moved here 5 years ago for a job. Thought I'd stay for a couple years, then move on to something bigger. But then life happened and I'm still here. Do you regret it? Staying? I shook my head. No, not really. Though I think I've been on autopilot for a while. Just going through the motions, you know? Work, home, same routine, same places, until last Tuesday, I said, meeting her eyes. When someone asked if they could sit at my table. She smiled again, that real smile. I almost didn't. There were other seats opening up. But something made me walk over to your table specifically. I'm glad you did. Me too. We talked for hours that afternoon. Not about anything particularly deep or profound. Just life things. She told me about her new job, how she was still figuring out the subway system, her search for a good running route in the neighborhood. I told her about my work, my apartment, the restaurant down the street that made the best dumplings in the city. But underneath the casual conversation, there was something else happening. A connection forming strand by strand. The way she laughed at my dumb jokes. How she leaned forward when she was really engaged in what I was saying. The comfortable silences that would fall between us. Where we'd just sit there drinking our coffee. And it didn't feel awkward at all. At one point, she asked what I was working on that rainy day when we first met. I admitted I'd been so distracted after she sat down that I'd accomplished basically nothing. I couldn't concentrate either, she said quietly. After I left, I walked around in the rain for like 30 minutes, completely forgetting I had groceries to buy. Really? Really, I kept thinking about, I don't know, the moment when our eyes met. It sounds silly saying it out loud. It doesn't, I said. I've been thinking about it too. The light outside started to change, that golden hour glow that happens before sunset. I glanced at my phone and realized we'd been talking for over 3 hours. It had felt like 30 minutes. I should probably go, she said reluctantly. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Yeah, me too. We gathered our things slowly, neither of us in a rush, despite what we'd just said. Outside the cafe, we stood on the sidewalk, and there was this moment of awkwardness. Do we hug, shake hands, just wave and walk away? I'd really like to do this again, I said. Me too. Can I get your number? She smiled and pulled out her phone. We exchanged numbers, and I immediately sent her a text so she'd have mine. A simple, "Hey, it's me from the cafe," she laughed when her phone buzzed. Already making sure I don't ghost you? Can you blame me? Not at all. We said goodbye and headed in opposite directions. But I only made it about half a block before I turned around to look back. She was doing the same thing. We both laughed, waved, and then continued on our separate ways. That night, lying in bed, I stared at my phone. Should I text her? Would it seem too eager? I'd waited 5 years in this city without feeling much of anything for anyone. And now, after one coffee shop conversation, I was acting like a teenager trying to figure out the rules of engagement. My phone buzzed. A text from her. Thanks for today. I haven't felt this comfortable talking to someone in a long time. I smiled in the darkness of my bedroom and typed back, "Same here. Coffee again soon? How about Tuesday? Same place." It's a date. As soon as I sent it, I panicked. Was it too much to call it a date? But her reply came quickly. "Looking forward to it." I put my phone down and stared at the ceiling, unable to stop smiling. Something had started. Something that felt different from anything I'd experienced before. And the best part? I think she felt it too. Tuesday came and I showed up at the cafe 15 minutes early. I told myself I was just being punctual, but really I was too anxious to wait any longer at home. I ordered my coffee and sat at our table. Our table. When had I started thinking of it that way? She arrived right on time, and when she spotted me, her whole face lit up. That reaction alone made my entire week worth it. Over the next few weeks, Tuesday afternoon coffee became our thing. Then it expanded to Thursday lunches. Then Saturday morning walks through the park. We fell into this easy rhythm, like we'd known each other for years instead of weeks. I learned so much about her during those early days. She was a graphic designer, freelancing while she built up her client base in the new city. She'd left her previous job and relationship at the same time, both of which had been slowly draining the life out of her. She loved thunderstorms because they reminded her of being a kid, when the world felt big and full of possibility. She wrote poetry sometimes, but never showed it to anyone. She had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile. And she was funny, not in an obvious joke-telling way, but in how she saw the world. She'd point out absurd things I'd never noticed before, like how pigeons always seem to be in a hurry but never actually get anywhere, or how every city bus has that one person who treats it like their personal living room. But as we spent more time together, I started to notice other things too. The way she'd sometimes zone out in the middle of a conversation, her mind clearly somewhere else. How she'd occasionally check her phone with this anxious expression, then put it away quickly. The careful way she talked about her past, like she was stepping around landmines. One evening, about a month after we'd started regularly meeting, we were walking through the park as the sun set. The trees were in full autumn color, reds and oranges and yellows creating this canopy above us. We'd just grabbed coffee and were supposed to be heading home, but neither of us wanted the evening to end. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Sure. That day you moved back here, what were you really running from?" She was quiet for a long moment. We kept walking, our footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. I wondered if I'd pushed too far, crossed some invisible line we'd been carefully dancing around. "His name was David," she finally said. "We were together for 4 years. Lived together for 2. And somewhere along the way I stopped being myself and started being whoever he wanted me to be. I didn't say anything, just listened. It wasn't dramatic or anything, no big fight or betrayal, just this slow erosion of who I was. I'd catch myself editing my opinions to match his, laughing at things that weren't funny, making myself smaller so he could feel bigger. And one day I woke up and didn't recognize the person in the mirror. So you left. So I left. Packed everything I couldn't live without into my car and drove back here. My parents think I'm crazy. My friends from there think I threw away a stable relationship for no good reason. But I couldn't breathe anymore." She stopped walking and turned to face me. "And then I met you. And for the first time in years, I feel like myself again. Like I can say what I actually think and it's okay. Like I don't have to perform or pretend." My heart was beating fast. "I'm glad. But I'm also terrified," she admitted. "Because I'm not ready for anything serious. I just got out of something that consumed me. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be what someone else wants." "Okay," I said. "Okay? Yeah, we don't have to put a label on this. We're just 2 people who like spending time together. That's enough." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true, because somewhere between that first meeting and this moment, I'd started falling for her. Not in the dramatic love-at-first-sight way, but in the quiet, steady way that happens when someone becomes the best part of your day. The thing was, I had my own complications I wasn't being entirely honest about. A few days later, I got a call from my boss. There was a project opening up at our company's branch in another city. A promotion, better pay, exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been waiting for. 5 years of working toward something like this? When would it start? I asked, already dreading the answer. "We'd need you there by the end of the year. 3 months to wrap things up here. 3 months. 12 weeks. The same amount of time I'd known her. I said I'd think about it, but my boss could hear the hesitation in my voice. "This is a big opportunity," he said. "Don't let it slip away." After I hung up, I sat in my apartment staring at nothing. 2 months ago, I would have said yes immediately. A new city, a fresh start, career advancement. Everything I thought I wanted. But now there was her. There was whatever this thing was between us that I couldn't quite name, but also couldn't imagine walking away from. I didn't tell her about the job offer. I kept telling myself I would, but the timing never felt right. When we were together, everything felt perfect and simple. Why complicate it with something that might not even happen? Maybe they'd give the position to someone else. Maybe I'd decide to turn it down. There was no need to worry her with hypotheticals, but secrets have a way of creating distance, even small ones. I started to notice myself holding back in conversations, being less present. She noticed too. "Are you okay?" she asked one day. We were back at our cafe at our table, but something felt off. "Yeah, just work stuff. Stressful project." It wasn't entirely a lie, but it wasn't entirely the truth either. She studied my face for a moment, and I could see her deciding whether to push or let it go. She let it go, but something shifted between us that day. A small crack in the foundation we'd been building. Things got more complicated a week later. We were supposed to meet for dinner, but she texted saying she had to cancel. Family emergency. I told her no problem, hoping everything was okay. She said she'd explain later. 2 days went by before I heard from her again. When we finally met up, she looked exhausted. "My mom's in the hospital," she said. "Nothing life-threatening, but she needs surgery. I might need to go stay with my parents for a while, help take care of her." "Of course, whatever you need. The timing is just terrible. I'm finally building my freelance business here, and now I might have to put everything on hold. Your mom is more important than work." "I know. It's just..." I finally felt like I was building something. A life here, and now everything feels unstable again. I reached across the table and took her hand. "It'll work out." She squeezed my hand back, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "Will it, though?" "Nothing ever seems to work out the way I hope it will." We sat there in silence for a while, holding hands across the table, and I knew I should tell her about the job offer, about the decision I was facing. But looking at her, already dealing with so much, I couldn't add another thing to her plate. So I stayed quiet. That was my mistake. Because secrets, even ones kept for good reasons, have a way of growing into bigger problems. A few days later, I ran into one of her neighbors at the grocery store. We'd met briefly when I'd walked her home one evening. She stopped to chat, asked how things were going, mentioned something about how exciting it must be that I was moving away soon for work. "Wait, what?" I said, confused. "Oh, didn't she tell you?" "I heard her on the phone the other day talking about it. I just assumed she'd mentioned it." My stomach dropped. She hadn't mentioned it because I hadn't told her. And somehow, through the strange way news travels in a neighborhood, she'd heard about my job offer before I could tell her myself. I texted her immediately. "We need to talk." Her reply came an hour later. "Yeah, we do." We met at the park that evening, both of us arriving with the weight of unspoken things hanging over us. We sat on a bench overlooking the pond, watching ducks glide across the water. "You're moving," she said. It wasn't a question. "Maybe there's a job offer. I haven't decided yet." "When were you going to tell me?" "I don't know." I kept waiting for the right time. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "There's never a right time for something like that." "I know. I'm sorry. I didn't want to worry you when you already had so much going on." "That's not your decision to make," she said. "Whether I worry or not is up to me." She was right, and I knew it. "I've been doing this thing," she continued, "where I try to convince myself that whatever this is between us doesn't matter that much. That we're just having fun, keeping things casual, because that feels safer than admitting that I'm falling for someone who might leave." "I'm falling for you too," I said quietly. "Then why didn't you tell me? Why did I have to hear it from my neighbor? Because I'm scared. Of how much I care about you, of making the wrong choice. 5 years I've been working towards something like this job opportunity, and then you sat down across from me in a coffee shop and suddenly I don't know what I want anymore." She turned to look at me, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. "I can't do this," she said. "I can't be the reason you give up your career. I've already been the person who made themselves small for someone else. I won't let you do the same thing. That's not what this is, isn't it? You're hesitating on a great opportunity because of me. Eventually, you'll resent me for it. No, I wouldn't. You don't know that. Neither of us knows that. We sat there as the sun set, both of us crying quietly, both of us knowing that something between us had broken, not because we didn't care about each other, but because. I texted her at 2 in the morning. Not smart, I know. But when you finally figure something out, waiting seems impossible. Are you awake? 3 dots appeared immediately. She'd been awake too. Yeah. Can we talk? I know we said space, but I need to tell you something. The dots appeared and disappeared a few times. Finally, okay, tomorrow. Tonight now, please. A long pause. Then where are you? Outside the cafe. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I waited on the sidewalk, pacing back and forth, rehearsing what I wanted to say. But when she appeared at the end of the block, walking toward me in sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, everything I'd planned to say disappeared. She stopped a few feet away from me and we just looked at each other. Even in the dim streetlight, even tired and casual, she was beautiful. Hi, she said softly. Hi. So what couldn't wait until morning? I took a deep breath. I turned down the job. Her eyes widened. What, when? About 3 hours ago. Sent the email and immediately panicked that I'd made a huge mistake. That's why I couldn't sleep. Why would you do that? Because I've been thinking about it all wrong. I've been treating this like a choice between my career and you. But it's not. It's a choice about what kind of life I want to live. She crossed her arms, protective. I told you I don't want to be the reason you give up opportunities. You're not. You're the reason I finally woke up and realized I've been sleepwalking through life for 5 years. That job, that city, it's just more of the same. Safe, predictable, impressive on paper. But when I imagine myself there, I feel nothing. And when I imagine not seeing you anymore, I feel everything. That's not fair, she said, but her voice cracked. You can't put that on me. I'm not. This decision is about me. About choosing the uncertain, messy, complicated option because it's real. Because you're real. Because what we have, even though it's new and scary and we have no idea where it's going, feels more right than anything else in my life. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I'm falling apart. My mom's sick, I'm barely keeping my business going. I'm still processing the disaster of my last relationship. I'm a mess. I'm not some perfect person worth giving up your dreams for. I don't want perfect. I want you. Messy, complicated, real you. She wiped at her face with her sleeve. What if it doesn't work? What if we try this and it crashes and burns and you end up resenting me? What if it does work? What if we're too scared to try and spend the rest of our lives wondering what might have been? I took a step closer to her. Look, I get it. We're both scared. We're both dealing with our own stuff. The timing isn't perfect. But I've learned something these past few weeks without you. Life doesn't wait for perfect timing. And the things worth having are usually the things that scare us. She looked up at me and in her eyes I could see the war between fear and hope. I don't know how to do this. How to let someone in without losing myself again. So we figure it out together. We take it slow. We communicate. We give each other space when we need it. We don't make the same mistakes we made before. And what happens when it gets hard? Because it will get hard. Then we deal with it. Together. Instead of running away like we both have in the past. She was quiet for a long moment, just looking at me. Then she said, I thought about you every single day. During the space we were supposed to be taking, I couldn't stop thinking about you. Me too. I'd see something funny and want to tell you. Or I'd have a rough day and wish you were there. And I kept thinking, this is stupid. We're both miserable apart. Why are we doing this? Because we were scared. I'm still scared, she admitted. So am I. But I'm more scared of not trying. She closed the distance between us and wrapped her arms around me. I held her tight, feeling like something that had been broken was clicking back into place. I have conditions, she said, her voice muffled against my chest. Okay. We do this for real. No holding back, no protecting ourselves by keeping things casual. If we're going to try, we actually try. Agreed. And we talk about the hard stuff. No more keeping secrets to protect each other. I promise.